Welcome to the weekend. I'm Mike Krause from the Independence Institute. Your normal host, John Caldera, slipped his ankle bracelet, and we have no idea where he is. Hopefully he'll be back in a couple of weeks. And stick around, because in a little bit we're going to be talking about some new sales tax rules that should be of particular interest to small business people in Colorado. But first, holy cow. We had an election Tuesday night, and so we thought we had to bring on the Hudsons to talk about it. Democratic political strategist Miller Hudson, how are you, sir?
I'm well, Mike.
Okay, and Republican political strategist Roger Hudson, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. Apparently, I have been hit by the blue wave.
Yes, you are. You're pretty blue.
I'm very blue. I am so blue. You have no idea how blue I am.
Let's forget about Colorado for a second and look at this whole idea of a big blue tsunami.
Sure.
Did not come to pass on Tuesday night nationwide. Dems did what you might expect for a party out of power to do in a first midterm for a new president. Right? They took back the House and lost seats in the Senate. You scale back to Colorado, and it seemed to be an outlier. The Colorado voters went Democrat for governor, so they kept that seat, but they also took Secretary of State, Treasurer, Attorney General, took control of the state Senate, and gained seats in their House majority. Do I have all that right?
Yeah.
So completely blue, ran the table.
And I think there's a dog catcher in there too, but yeah, absolutely.
All right. Now, here's the big question, though. Does this, and you alluded to this when we were chatting about this before, so does this mean that Colorado is just solidly blue, and that's the deal now?
I would recommend against burning your red T-shirts yet. Because if you actually look at the margins, they were fairly small. The Democrats were winning by 3 or 4 points. If they spent a lot of money, they maybe won by 5 or 6. In the Attorney General's race, where Phil Weiser had spent all of his money in a primary, couldn't get on TV, probably was outspent 5 or 6 to 1. He only won by 1.5%. So it proved that you could pick up a little on it, but I called it team voting. I think yesterday the Democrats came out, they voted for their team. Republicans came out, they voted for their teams. Right now they've got just a little bit of an edge.
All right, so let's go over here to the Republican side. Was this just the Democrats' year, or was this just a Trump blowback, or was there a bigger problem with over on the Republican side?
You know, I really think that, again, it was, once again, Republicans, and we do this every year, we never make that pivot from the primary. We never, ever do. Walker really tried really hard to make that pivot from that hard right. And again, he's fighting against Trump. I'm sure every interview he did, he had 5 questions about Donald Trump. Are you going to do? Do you agree with? Can you do? Can you follow? Will you do if he says? And even Mike Pence was here at the airport for what, maybe 15 minutes, did a couple interviews, and he didn't even do anything with Walker, supposedly a scheduling conflict. And I just could not escape the Donald Trump factor, which in a general election is a problem, not so much in a primary, but just couldn't make that transition. And I don't think there was a really good ground game to know what that was. The Democrat and the Republican margin, as you just heard, it was so thin, so tiny, that I think it was really about women. It was about unaffiliated voters in Colorado. It was very expected. Was it expected this heavy? No, I don't think so. I mean, it's been, what, 1936 since we had a fully Democrat,
fully Democrat state government.
State government, everything.
Right.
So it took 100 years to get us here. I don't know if that means that it's going to be this way, you know, in 2 years or 4 years, but it definitely is this year. I will say that some really good people lost their job, and not because they did a bad job. You know, I point to Arapahoe County in particular. They lost a sheriff that's done a great job, Cole Wist.
I was very surprised, by the way, that the sheriff lost his job.
Me too. He's great and very well loved there, and so is Cole Wist, the assistant minority leader. I mean, incredibly smart guy. Did the right thing by going middle ground. Was always the guy who brought everybody to the table and negotiated. I mean, he got almost all of his bills through to John Hickenlooper's desk for signature. That these good people lost their jobs is really significant. Not just the top of the ticket, but down lower, because they were extremely well liked, but they just couldn't deal with all the noise that had to do with Donald Trump and women voters and just the muddled playing field.
Roger you brought up unaffiliated voters, man. They turned out in a big way. And in fact, they outdid Republicans and Democrats, right? And I don't think this is not a one-off. This is the new trend, right? Because a lot of people, I personally, and I'm not, who I know personally isn't necessarily reflective of the broader electorate, but I know a lot of people who have unaffiliated since the new law went into effect that allows them to vote in primaries. Are we going to see more of this?
Right, absolutely. And neither party has developed a strategy for reaching these voters. I mean, I could see in this election on the Democratic side, it was find everybody with a D after their name if their ballot hasn't been returned. Plant somebody on their porch until they either give it to you or they take it to the drop-off. Republicans were doing the same thing. And there was no outreach. It was roll the dice, we'll see what the unaffiliated voters do. And with the margins as narrow as they are, the first party that figures out how to reach and persuade the unaffiliated voters, then you will get a blue wave or a red wave in this state.
Here's the interesting, the flip side to Colorado flipping blue on candidates. Is it the same voters who turned the state government blue also killed a statewide education tax increase, a statewide transportation tax increase, a fracking ban, and a debt measure. So this was not, these are at odds with each other, right? They voted Democrat, they went to the left on candidates, they went fiscal conservative on ballot measures. What does this tell us about Colorado? Because we like to say that we think, anyway, that this is the best way to describe Colorado is not red or blue or even purple, but more of a small L libertarianish leaning state. Is it still trending that way? Is that what these results tell us, that we don't want taxes, we don't want debt, and by the way, we're going to give the Democrats a chance? Roger, go ahead.
I'm going to say, and again, I think we have to go back to the unaffiliateds, because they're not just unaffiliated, they're proudly unaffiliated, right?
Yeah, sure.
There was a time when I'm a Republican.
I'm not a member of a party.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm an unaffiliated voter. I'm one of those. I'm not one of those. I'm one of these. And that's kind of the new in trend. But I think Colorado really hasn't changed its makeup. We're an aging state. We're now the third fastest growing aging state in the country, which is surprising. So we have an older demographic who usually vote Republican, who are more conservative, who are then thinking about the land they own, the taxes they're paying. I think they're still there. They just moved to unaffiliated because they were tired of all the baloney that went along with being part of a state party. And even now, what's the benefit of being a Republican or a Democrat in Colorado? There isn't any, except they ask you for money all the time. So I think those very conservative voters are still there. I think they voted that way on the ballot propositions and the amendments. And I think you saw that. They weren't going to spend any money. You weren't going to take any of my money. I want less government, not more. But they weren't really hot on candidates who were talking about social issues. I don't want anybody who's going to tell me about anything to do with my personal life. And I think you see that in the election of Jared Polis. I think that in particular, it's like, live and let live is very Colorado.
Well, let me follow up on that for just a second. I think one of the problems with putting these tax questions on the ballot is there's all the wordage and verbiage you have to put on because of Tabor. People look at these and their eyes glaze over. They don't even understand what you're asking them to do in these questions. So that hurts it. The other thing is that I think that voters will consider something sent to them by the legislature, but when they know that the Chamber of Commerce cooked up 110, for example, you ask yourself, is this a good idea? I don't know, 0.6 cents sales tax. I want better roads, but where is this money actually going to go? Remember Wally Rail with George Wallace 10, 15 years ago? I mean, the legislature has to do its job or we won't solve these problems. That's my opinion.
Yeah, but we didn't even lower the age to become representative in the assembly. So, I understand the money thing, but again, this is a very get off my lawn kind of vote, right? We don't want those youngsters in our legislature.
No, I want someone who's paid some property taxes for a couple of years, for God's sake.
Like paying some taxes, have some kids in college.
But to your point, some of the referred measures did do well. Y and Z did well, right?
Very well.
We went
Good
ahead
campaign.
But the citizen initiated ones didn't do well, and ours didn't do well.
Right.
In fact, we failed right up there with our debt measure for roads failed right up there with the tax increase for Prop 10.
That was confusing though, because you never quite. I don't think they've still figured it out. If we voted yes on both, what would we have done? If we vote no on what does the state do? If we vote one yes, one, it was just very confusing that they all came out at the same time.
It was. I remember, I think it was 2013, that when Governor Hickenlooper had a Democratic legislature, the guy could not find a single bill to veto. And then all of a sudden, when Republicans took back the Senate, John Hickenlooper's job got a whole lot easier.
Yeah, he found his pen.
He found his veto pen, and stuff wasn't even making it to his desk, thank goodness. And this is one of the great things, and this is one of the untold stories, I think, is that we had divided government for the last 2 legislative sessions, and the parties were killing off the worst instincts of each other in the legislature. You saw a lot of stuff just get, I mean, stuff was getting killed left and right in committee hearings.
Right.
Okay, so now Jared Polis has a Democratic legislature. Do you think Jared wishes he had a Republican Senate, or is he looking forward to getting those bills from a Dem legislature? Is this a problem for him, or is this something he's like, yeah, let's do it?
You know, my thought, and this is just what I know of Jared and my conversations with he and his staff, and what I know about the legislature, my time there at the Capitol, but I believe that Jared is kind of the unicorn in this situation, because even though he's been in Congress, he's not been in Colorado. He's been in Washington. So all of these people at the legislature, as they do whatever they do, he's kind of the outlier. So I think it's going to be easier for him to say, no, I'm not doing that. And I think he's going to be forced to. He's going to get some crazy stuff out of this legislature that I think he's going to have the vision that's larger than just Colorado, which is, to give the strokes of the Democrats a little bit, is his experience in D.C. is going to help him with that. But yeah, I think he's going to wish he had some boogeymen in the corner where he could go, it's their fault. They did that.
Republicans did that.
But they're still there. You got some very vocal folks. Patrick Neville is not quiet. He's not shy. He will still open with the personhood bill this session, as he has every other session. So there's going to be some noise there. But does he address it? Does Jared, the governor-elect Polis, address it, or does he just move it on? I don't think Patrick's going to let him do that.
What happens when the Democrats start sending Jared bills, and is he going to pull out his? Will he be willing to pull out his veto
I'm
pen?
sure he'd be willing to do it. But I think that what Jared needs to do, and I'm confident he'll get advice to do it, is you sit down with the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate, and you say, here's the list of things I don't want to see on my desk, and these are the things I need on my desk, and these are the dates I want you to get them out of there by. And sequence them. We're going to do education, we're going to do transportation, and go down the list. Now, we haven't had a governor probably since Roy Romer who's been willing to do that, and he had to do it with Republican leadership. And so he had to say, okay, I'll give you these if you'll give me these. It's a little bit different, but even they say this is a weak governor state. Yes, it is, but he's the man with the big stick.
And it's not really even about the Democrats having the majority. Again, you go back to the margin here. Jared Polis does not have a mandate. I mean, it was close, and there is a very loud contingency of Colorado who is terrified that Jared Polis will decimate energy, will overspend on education in a way that is mind-boggling. So he has something to prove not only to the left, but to the right, who are very, very iffy on him right now. So if he wants a successful time in that office and a quiet one, I suggest he start finding some middle ground. And he's going to have to do that because the legislature is not going to do it, especially the House.
But as Bobby Kennedy once observed, in the final analysis, there's no real substitute for brains. Jared is a smart guy. He'll get on top of it.
Fair enough, he is a smart guy. I think it would be a mistake for people to assume that there's one big happy family going on over at that legislature. I actually predict conflict within the Democratic Party, and I think we've already heard mutterings about, well, the fracking ban 112 failed. Well, let's just introduce it as a bill or some version of it. And that's fine if you're a Denver Democrat.
Right.
But what happens if you introduce that bill? What kind of box do you paint a Pueblo Democrat, an Adams County Democrat, an Arapahoe Democrat, a Weld Democrat? What kind of box do you put those folks in, and what do they do?
Yeah, it's bad.
And so in that vein, let's prognosticate. Give me a couple of big bills you think you'll see drop by this new Democrat majority that'll be controversial within the party?
Well, I think maybe we'll actually get a transportation proposal. I'm not saying it'll be a solution, and maybe and they're going to have to send it to voters. But you know, for 8 years, both Democrats and Republicans have said our #1 priority is transportation and haven't gotten anything out of the legislature. I think we'll get something out this time. Now, you know, whether it's something voters can embrace, that's another issue. But I'd say transportation, you will see a solution on that. They might nibble around the edges on education funding, but it's so big in terms of what's needed that may take them 2 years to come up with a solution on that one. And then beyond that, I don't know what the priorities are going to be for this legislature. I would be surprised if anybody tried to tackle the energy development thing right now. There was a statement. It was large from the voters. They said leave it alone, and I think the legislature will leave it alone.
Right. You, sir? What do you think? Give me some predictions. What are Dems going to drop?
I'm going to do a broader sense for you because we have not touched on the AG's office yet.
Right.
And I think it aligns with this. I think you're going to have some kumbaya. You're going to have a lot of let's bipartisan, let's shake hands, let's kiss some babies, and quietly.
Let's make good things happen.
Let's make good things happen. What is it? What's John's thing about eloquent government? What's his thing? He always loves to talk. Anyway, but what you're going to see is that's going to transition very quickly to a lot of meaningless statements, proclamations about Donald Trump and about what we are as Colorado. And I think you're going to see a very proactive Attorney General. Cynthia Kaufman, who I obviously worked for as a PIO for a year, signed on to, I think it was 5 lawsuits against the federal government. I think you're going to see twice as much with Phil Weiser. That's what he ran on. He was going to sue, and he was going to be that voice against Donald Trump. And I think you're going to see an echo chamber from that, from Boulder into the legislature, and how they all deal with what's going on there is going to be loud. So I think that's going to be a really big distraction, not only for the governor, but also the legislature and how they reel that in. And Cynthia did sue John Hickenlooper and win in the Supreme Court. And I think that decision will really affect what his ability is to have this independent ability to sue the federal government.
Okay. Gentlemen, we're out of time. How about we come back sometime during the legislative session to see if you were right?
Yeah.
Sound good?
I like it.
That's right.
All right. Thanks. Stick around. Stay tuned.